My father was in the construction business, building highways and earth-fill dams, and had all of the crushing and transportation equipment and the excavation equipment. The old rancher that owned the property where the pumice mine is, and they got a hold of a block company down in Salt Lake City, asked them if they would be willing to take a sample of it to see if it would make decent block. Came to my father, I should say, and asked if he would be willing to get a test sample out for him. We blasted some material out and trucked it to Salt Lake. They tested it and then found out it made really excellent block. My father also, he had more faith in the business, by far more than what I did. He could see the building trades using lots of material. As it first started, it was just a sideline to his construction business. As that test turned out to be successful, now they wanted to start getting some production quantities brought into their block plants, and so we made an agreement with the owners there for us to do all the work. We'd handle all of the extraction, processing, transportation, sales, and then just pay them a royalty for their material. Actual production didn't start out of there until '59, but we opened it up and got the samples out. In 1958 was the year I graduated from high school. That fall, I went to the University of Utah and started studying civil engineering. Because my father was supporting my education and providing for me, I always came home on the weekends and worked Saturday all day and part of Sunday, and then we'd go back to Salt Lake to get the studies done and back to school. Graduated in '63 with a bachelor's in civil engineering. At that point in time, then I moved back to Malad and joined him in his business and just helped wherever we could. At about that time, he had had some differences with Mr. Fredrickson, who had financed his business. Mr. Fredrickson had decided that he would no longer subordinate the mortgages for bonding, so that made things a little different. Pumice now became a bigger part of our business. The way we operate the pumice mine is we go gangbusters during the summertime, we build large inventories, and then we truck out during the wintertime. But because it's in building products and we're here in a snowy country, the building shuts down pretty well in the winter, and so it's more of a seasonal business, and left us really scraping for business, in the wintertime. Following Dad's bankruptcy of his construction company, which happened in about 1966, the pumice mine was his only income. And it was such a marginal business that both myself and his brother that had helped finance the purchase of the mining equipment at the mine so that he could salvage that part of his business advised him that he give it up, but he didn't. Obviously, there was no need for me down there, and pumice wouldn't even support him, let alone two families. First of '67, went to work for the Highway Department, and I worked there with the Idaho Department of Highways until 1971. During that time, a company by the name of Owens, Illinois, they went on a nationwide search to see if they couldn't find a domestic supply of fine ground pumice for the grinding of television faceplates. And this is just at the beginning of color television. One step of the grinding of television glass had to be done with pumice. All the pumice prior to that time was coming from Italy, and the supply of it was very poor. Either they couldn't get it, or when they could get it, they didn't know when it was going to come in, how much they was going to get. And Father got the letter, and he asked me if I could help him come up and put some kind of a pilot plant together, design it, and provide them with a sample that they would need to see if our pumice would work for the grinding of television glass.
The things that I remember most from our early days, when we first started into the fine grinding business, of course we were living in Rupert, Idaho. Dad was a civil for the state of Idaho, and I was in 6th grade, so I'm probably 12 years old. But the thing that I remember is on the weekends, hopping in the car, and every weekend from Rupert to Malad.
Every weekend I'd come down and after work, and we'd spend the weekend trying to put together this pilot plant.
I can remember one of our little Alice Chalmers whip sifters and the little grinder that we were using, and we'd pack the pumice up a ladder in a bucket. I don't know how many trips up that ladder I made.
And they'd climb a ladder again and dump it in this screen with the 5-gallon buckets and put it through the screen until we finally had, I don't know, I'd say 2 or 3 tons of it.
And cranked out just enough samples for those folks to prove that resource out in the TV glass plants.
Sent it back to Owens, Illinois, to their glass factory where they tried it, and it worked. Now they approached us with a contract to go ahead and provide them with a certain amount of pumice. Then we needed some real money to put together a plant, because we couldn't use that tiny little pilot plant to produce what they needed. And the bank wouldn't loan him anything as far as putting a plant together. Because of my father's 2 things. He'd just been through bankruptcy 3 years ago, and he had had these open heart surgeries. They didn't know how long he was going to live or if he was going to live. But what they did tell him was that if I would come join him in the business and help with it, that then they would loan the money. And so we designed a plant and put it in there, the old diesel shop that he'd had when he was in the construction business. There was a lot of improvising and using what you had because we was really putting it together on a shoestring. They were really happy with the material. It was working fine. One of the first things we had to do was to put in multiple shifts. All of a sudden we got a call from our customer, Owens, Illinois, that says, hey, we've got some bad pumice back here. We can't use it. Don't produce any more. And here we are, we've got everything we possibly could scrape up. They're our only customer for this stuff. So we was really in a spot and didn't know what to do. We got a hole in the screen. It let oversized pieces get into the product and contaminate the product with oversize. And what had happened is some of our guys, while they was operating on the night shift, they just kind of they'd turn the feed down a little bit so they knew the plant would run fine, wouldn't have any plug-ups or anything. Then they go down, lay down, and go to sleep. Once we got investigating and I finally found out what it was, then I finally talked to him and says, look, give us a chance. We will make it in grade, and it will stay in grade. So from there on, then I set up a more routine schedule and different places of sampling to make sure that there were no oversized particles in that. I think we produced about 1.5 tons, and we put it in the back of an old Ford pickup, and Dad and I hopped in the pickup and we hightailed it for Pittston, Pennsylvania. Of course, it run beautiful now. The gradation was right. They were the company that got this part of our business really going, Owens, Illinois. They weren't the type of a company that always said, hey, this is right, you've got a problem, you fix it. They were the type of people that says, we've got a problem, let us help you fix it. That's the type of people that we were dealing with, and thank goodness, because just a startup company like us, if they would have been, tough on us, that we couldn't have made it. We had all our eggs in one basket. I started checking other TV glass manufacturers, and we got samples out to them, and as soon as we got samples to them and got the gradations that they wanted, man, they just come clamoring right to our door, and we took it. And we didn't know anything about pricing either. I had no idea what they were paying for pumice. We didn't know what to charge them for the pumice. And so I just figured, well, let's just take our cost and put on a decent margin and see if they'll buy it. Well, gee, they bought it, no problem. Well, come to find out, the Italians were charging them 3 times as much as we were. And the Italians had a pumice processing plant in Long Island City, New York. We put them out of business.
I believe that we've always been competitively priced because we've always charged rather than what the market would bear. We've charged what the cost of operation or production is, plus the margin that we needed. The Italians' pricing scheme was much different. It was obviously what the market would bear, and it was different from day to day.
Had I known, I might have priced it up a little higher. but we didn't know, and yet I put what I felt was a good margin on it. And that's kind of been a business philosophy of ours of ever since, Don't go out there and gouge the customer. If you can make a little money on it, great. Make some money and be happy, And as we've worked with distributors and different things, the same there, you have to realize everybody has to get a piece of the pie, and they have to get, in order to be happy, and you all work together. At that point, about 4 majors. There was Owens, Illinois, there was Corning Glass, and there was Philips in Europe, and NEG in Japan.
Our first jump into the export market was in Asia. The Asians had kept a little bit of an eye on us. They knew what was happening, and they had actually partnered with our domestic company, and they knew that to develop the large, very large formats, 16 by 9 HGTV, that the grind surface on the glass had to be much better than it was currently. They already knew of our pumice, they tested it, they tried it, they just knew that we needed to bring the impurities down slightly so that it wouldn't scratch this high-end glass. So again, we're developed by a TV glass company. So same story. We came back, we got to work, we developed samples, sent them back to Japan, and determined that we could do what they needed with the glass and bring the impurities down. So now that opened the door for us worldwide.
Subsequent to that, they still had their operations there in Lipari. They had a bad strike there in Italy, and I don't remember now whether it was a dock strike or a trucking strike or what. Anyway, they went on strike, and they just cut her off. And we got a call from the Philips folks over there in Germany and asked if we had any pumice we could send. Sure, we got pumice to send you. And so they set up a fleet going of 747s to where we would haul the pumice to Salt Lake City. They'd pull all the seats out of the 747, load it full of pumice, fly it to Germany. And we did that for, I don't know, a couple of months until we was able to get the boats, enough going by water to get over to them to keep their source of supply. So consequently, there was no question they was done. They was no longer dealing with the Italians, and so we took all of their European business.
So Philips basically came to us at that point, and along with some other NEG in Wales, actually, I think that's probably what really got their attention. NEG opened a sister plant in Wales, and of course we immediately started supplying them right in Philips's backyard. We started picking off all the CRT glass manufacturers around Philips, being the giant, and then the doors just opened up for us at that point.
Thinking back to the old plant, and as we gained business, kept gaining business, of course the plant's noisy, it's just natural. We got a lot of fans, and occasionally you get burping a little dust out here and there.
We were quite an irritant to the neighborhood. Obviously, a dusty, noisy, fine grinding plant in the middle of a residential area, that can't last. If we were going to become anything more, it would have to be somewhere else. So I really count that as a blessing. The people that finally were able to get us, moved along, that helped get us out of that neighborhood was good.
People there around there finally took us to court, and in the court put an injunction on us that we would need to be out of there within, I don't know, it was a year and a half, something like that.
It was time to expand, but of course financing was going to become the first critical issue. We had not been in business for an awful long time, and I guess you could say we're just still retiring some debt and just barely getting the bills paid.
Got Brad, Hess, and Kim down here putting the mud in the forms.
I had a good engineering friend, and he came to me and says, hey, I know of a new program that was 100% grant to a city or a county or to develop industrial parks. They were wanting to get industrial parks in rural areas, and we were able to get the entire amount for the state of Idaho for 2 years running to the city of Malad.
There's Brad and the crew. They're forming up, starting to set rebar for the east plant footing down here.
It was kind of interesting to do not only the accounting work of the business plan, the pro formas and this type of thing, but then also to look at the opportunities that we had for production efficiencies by having a plant that was designed and built around newer technologies of production.
The other thing that was kind of a blessing in disguise, because of the injunction, now there was another government program that for every job you could create, you could qualify for so many dollars of SBA loan. And in this case, because we had the injunction, a job lost counted as much as a job created. That helped us get the financing that we needed to be able to get started down here and move in.
For the bend, the center and the north one.
My emphasis within business was production management, and one of the keystone classes was to write a business plan for a production operation, and so basically wrote the business plan that secured the financing or helped secure the financing for our expansion down into the industrial park.
And then also about that time, the state of Idaho started doing industrial revenue bonding. Had it not been for those several things falling in place, kind of as they did, and at the timing they did, and now the city had an industrial park that they could load somebody in. We'd agreed to come into it. That was all fine. But now we had to have financing in order to do it. We had the court injunction, which helped us qualify for the financing. And then an Idaho bank that says, hey, we'll take these guys on.
When it comes to designing the new plant, that was the greatest thing is we've got in-house a civil engineer. And Dad had basically built the old plant. So he knew what worked well and what didn't work well. The only reason I knew it didn't work well is I was the grunt that had to go clean up the mess that it made when something broke. But yeah, we did understand a lot of what we knew was going to work best. We immediately contracted with a firm that does build processing plants like that, and with the knowledge that we already had from Pumice and with their knowledge of building processing facilities, it was a great design.
In the spring of 1985, we broke ground for this plant, and in the spring of 1986, we had it up and running. As we're talking about design of this plant down here and of our plants, what we did is took and divided our material into small gradations. So now when a customer wanted material, we would just ask him, what's your specifications? What do you really want? So that had a lot to do with our being able to capture the marketplace also, is the fact that we had much more control on our gradations.
Matter of fact, we built the second plant and exactly duplicated it. It's a mirror image of it. I mean, you would think after 10 years we'd say, we really need to do something different. We didn't. Very, very little.
With us finally getting the Japanese business, we had worldwide well over 50% market share of all of the fine ground pumice being sold in the world. Higher than that in the TV glass market. And then along comes the flat TV screen. We seen it coming, and I figured we had several years before flat screens would take over. But it really, whole world made a very fast transition from the old cathode ray tube, which required the finishing because of the way it was made, to the flat screen TV. Thank goodness that the CRT market held up long enough and our sales held up long enough that we got our plants paid for, or we would have had difficulty creating enough cash flow to make payments.
It's been a great product diversity that's really packing a lot of the weight of the company right now and shows a tremendous amount of growth for us also. But we need to continue to be innovative.
Got to give Mike a lot of credit for holding the place together and figuring out where was our new markets. I mean, somebody moved our cheese. That was such a tremendous volume market for high-grade pumice that would bring a nice price, and it just disappeared. As small as our business is, we're still the major producer of fine ground industrial pumice in the world. We're not very big, but we're the biggest in the world for what we do. So we found our niche, is what it amounts to.
There's been many opportunities to perhaps profit take or take advantage of worldwide shortages or work ethics that maybe one country didn't have over ours. These TV glass plants employing thousands of people, millions if not billions of dollars of revenue go through them, but yet to be able to have one simple product like this that could take them down. But we never ever took advantage of that. And so I see that that's created long-term relationships throughout the industry. And we've been recognized as a company that has integrity. If we say we're going to do it, we're going to do it. And they know that pricing as well as service and the quality of the product it's going to be what it's advertised to be.
We've had actually over 50 years of mining pumice, and I think that probably gives us more experience than anybody in the world when it comes to mining pumice.
I can remember when the Italians come and offered a buyout, and I got thinking, Dad, you're crazy. Let's do this. That sounded like good money at that time. And I remember a couple subsequent buyout offers after that. Dad, let's do that. It's not about the money. So, excuse me. But it took me a while to figure that out. It did. It's not about the money. So, hey, where's Hess Pumice going? It's going down similar to the same trail, but for the next generations. And it's not a matter of how big it gets or how profitable it gets, but it's to have something to hand off, to pass it.